So you heard about the Elder Scrolls Online MMO from a friend. Maybe you're a former player who left the game or thinking about trying out the game. Either way, you're wondering now, is ESO worth playing in 2023? Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com. I've been playing ESO since launch with over 50 in-game characters across all servers with thousands of hours in the game. With all this experience and knowledge, I'm going to give you an honest opinion on whether ESO is worth starting or coming back to in the new year. For those of you that might not be familiar, ESO is set in the world of Tamriel, with the events of the game occurring 1,000 years before those in Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. First launched in 2014, the game will celebrate its 9th anniversary in the spring. Each year, the game has seen a steady increase in expansions and updated content, meaning that both brand new and returning players will have plenty to do in-game. But does quantity mean quality? Let's take a look. Before we go over the rest of the video, I want to shout out our sponsor for the day, WD Black. They sent me 2 cool products to try out, which will give you a lot more storage space, whether you're on a console like a PlayStation or in general, and you need a lot more storage space. You needed something portable and mobile like I do. You can see here my PlayStation 5. I play with my son. We play some Destiny, Elder Scrolls Online, and pretty soon to be Hogwarts, and you're always running out of space. This aims to solve a quick, easy solution, so let's install it and see how it goes. So this is going to be pretty easy so far. I can figure it out. It has a USB 3 cable, so you can use it on PlayStation or on your PC. So this WD Black portable solution just uses a USB, so we're gonna install it to increase our capacity along with our speed to transfer files, access them very quickly, and get back to gaming. All right, we're at the PlayStation 5. All I did was format my hard drive, and now I have almost an extra terabyte of space. And the best thing about this one is you can use it on laptops as well, so a PC. So it's portable. You can take it, unplug it, go into a different system, bang, the files are ready for you to access. Think about WD Black. Link in the description below if you want to purchase this product. It helps me out, it helps you, so you can get back to the gaming. Thanks for watching. Back to our video. Story and setting. The game is set in the year 582 of the Second Era, a period where there is no emperor on the Ruby Throne. Naturally, someone sought to capture the throne for themselves, and the Alliance War broke out between the 3 different alliances: the Ebonheart Pact, the Aldemary Dominion, and the Daggerfall Covenant. These alliances are important for the player versus player aspect of the game, and more of a background story to the main plot and starting point when starting a new character. During this time, Tamriel was also going through the Plains Meld. The Plains Meld was a massive Daedric invasion that affected the entire universe, not just Tamriel. The Daedric prince Molag Bal was at the heart of the Plains Meld and used his dark anchors to try to merge Cold Harbor, his realm of oblivion, with the rest of the world. Along with Molag Bal, Mannimarco is the other antagonist to the main story. He's an agent of Molag Bal who founded the Order of the Black Worm, also known as the Worm Cult. To please the Daedric prince, Mannimarco and his Worm Cult would sacrifice people to Molag Bal, leaving them as soulless husks seeing out the rest of their days in Cold Harbor. And like other Elder Scrolls games, you'll start out in a prison with a brief tutorial and freedom to go where you want and do what you want. Consider ESO's story the #1 focal point of the game, with hundreds, if not thousands, of fully voice-acted quests across a sprawling amount of zones. But before you begin, we must pick a class, and that's next. Classes. Before we jump in, know that ESO is a game where all classes can fulfill any role. ESO, like other MMOs, follows the holy trinity of tank, healer, and damage dealer. Unlike other MMOs, you're not locked into 1 or 2 roles. You can simply swap skills, morph champion points and gear, and boom, you're ready for a different role. ESO made a free system for swapping builds called the Armory. Not being forced into 1 role was the reason I was attracted to ESO in the first place. I wanted to be able to heal myself as a damage dealer, and you can do exactly that with each and every class and role. Now moving on to classes specifically. There are 4 base game classes in ESO, with an additional 2 classes locked behind paid DLCs. The 4 base game classes are the dragonknight, a fire-breathing damage over time class that loves playing up close and personal. As of the making of this video, this is my main and what I play the most currently. This class currently is S tier in nearly all categories but healing, and it is great for those that love aggressive playstyles. The Nightblade. Consider these the stealthy rogue type characters with the unique ability to cloak or turn invisible on demand. I consider Nightblades one of the strongest damage dealers and great to play if you love sneaky. Nightblades are also extraordinarily strong PvP characters and excel at solo play. Sorcerers are up next, your typical range caster. They possess incredible speed and use lightning to aid themselves in combat. The sort currently is very strong for beginners or returning players, and I recommend currently if you're getting back into the game or you're someone new looking for something strong straight away. You can expect simplistic gameplay with high damage, mobility, and survivability. The Templar. Consider this class your holy warrior or paladin from other games, strong healing for themselves or others with range and melee damage. The Templar has seen some major changes recently, making them significantly weaker, but it's an all-around easy class to play. And that's it for the base game classes. Moving on to the 2 DLC purchase required classes. The Warden. Consider this a gassed up version of the Templar, better healing, utility, and damage. You'll use the power of nature, including pets and ice, to aid you in combat. Wardens are extremely strong and can be argued the best class overall in the Elder Scrolls Online. The Necromancer is up next, and they use corpses to aid them in battle, creating a very unique and fun playstyle. They are incredibly durable, with high damage but come with downsides. They're slow as molasses and hard to play. It requires a lot more complex gameplay to take advantage of this class, but if you do, you'll be destroying the competition. That's it for the classes, but I'll say this, ESO always has a meta class, which usually shifts every 3 or 4 months. What it does well is keep at least 5 out of the 6 classes close in terms of performance. It's an MMO, balance will always be in flux, but if you sit back, pick your class, and enjoy the ride, the wave of patches, you'll be somewhat on an even playing field. As far as a new class, we don't know if that's coming in 2023. We've received an update from studio director Matt Firer foreshadowing what could come, one of the most requested features in the Elder Scrolls. Could this be a class or a skill line? As of the making of this video, we don't know, but stay tuned to this channel if you want to find out. Moving on to what I love most about the game, and that's the combat. The combat in the Elder Scrolls Online is quite different from the traditional World of Warcraft tab target games. In this game, you'll have a 1-second global cooldown on abilities rather than 1.5 like traditional games, making ability usage much quicker. This game also gives you 2 bars which you can swap back and forth freely. Each has 5 abilities and ultimate, or a super ability which has a high impact on the battlefield and needs to be used timely. You'll be rotating back and forth from front bar to back bar, casting abilities, managing your resources, and maintaining focus on your movement. Speaking of movement, that's where the game combat really shines, combining the best of action-oriented games. You'll have blocking, dodging, sprinting, bashing, all consuming your stamina, while you'll have abilities that cost stamina or magic, and sometimes both. Unlike WoW or other tab target games, this game becomes much more about managing your resources than purely looking at cooldowns. Sure, you'll have to do that too, but in 2022, ESO saw a massive shift in combat. Most of the high-powered damage over time or heal over time abilities were changed from 10 seconds to 20 seconds, making it much easier to manage a decent rotation. Moreover, ZeniMax Online Studios lowered the overall damage of light attacks. Light attack weaving has been in the game since day one. It is complex for new players or returning players to understand. The basic premise is this. You have 2 separate global cooldowns, light attack and abilities, both on 1-second timers. The closer you compare these together, like a heartbeat, light attack ability, the more damage you do. Since light attacking in between abilities is essentially free, since there's 2 global cooldowns. Your damage will skyrocket, weaving in light attacks, making the combat extraordinarily fun and nearly impossible to manage. In 2023, you'll see a reduction in the need to light attack, plus much easier rotation and simplistic gameplay. Moreover, the High Isles chapter introduced a new mythic one-piece item, Oakensoul, locking you into only 1 bar but giving you a huge boost in survivability and damage. With this ring comes easier gameplay, which can compete with 2-bar builds, making the game much more accessible, though it requires the chapter High Isles purchase. Wrapping up combat, consider PvE more about managing cooldowns and damage over time and healing over time abilities, maintaining high uptimes on buffs to optimize your damage and your group, while PvP becomes much more about instincts and reacting quickly. ESO, in my opinion, blends the best of traditional MMOs with action-oriented game combat. It's one of the reasons I've played since launch and continue to do so. Next up, we have leveling, one of my favorite activities in ESO. ESO leveling goes from 1 to 50, then a complex and clunky progression system called champion points. The real reason ESO leveling is so fun is because every second you're dripping with progression. You reach new levels at lightning speed with rewards at each level, giving you incentive to keep going. Obtaining new skills, morphing those skills, and playing around with your builds to feel the power increase quickly. Another advantage of this game's leveling is it really does follow a traditional Elder Scrolls game. Do an hour tutorial and then explore the game. Within a couple hours you can hit level 10 and immediately start doing group PvE and PvP content. You can explore and quest, grind zombies, PvE in battlegrounds, or farm dungeons. It's really however you want to do it, and all the tracks are simple and easy to understand. Overland or zones are the main source of most new players' leveling experience. Each zone contains world bosses, mini quests, dolmens, delves, collectibles like Sky Shard and Lorebook, and good old Mundus stones like any other Elder Scrolls game. There's simply a lot, and the average or new player can feel overwhelmed when tackling each and every zone. While ESO doesn't have the Skyrim golden trail holding your hand telling you where to go, it has improved by adding a zone guide which can show you various activities to complete per zone. Between the story, learning about the skills, collecting Sky Shards, earning achievements, leveling in ESO will have you dripping with dopamine, and the game will be very hard to put down. Let's talk about the end game. So now you've reached level 50, what's next? Sadly, this is a downside to ESO, its end game. It's a bit confusing. You see, you'll have max level at 50, but then you're going to start earning champion points, an alternate form of progression, with slottable benefits from everything from movement speed to increased spell damage to fishing perks. I could go on and on about champion points, but the key thing to understand is this. You won't start collecting relevant gear because ESO cap is 50, but the gear cap is champion point 160. That's what you need to reach in order to start collecting relevant gear. Champion points go all the way up to 3,600, but are limited in terms of combat effectiveness due to the slottable choices being 4 per constellation. Around 800 champion points, you start feeling powerful, and around 1500, there's almost no other benefit besides convenience in obtaining champion points. So don't let that 3,600 number fool you. It doesn't really affect your performance because you can only slot 4 per constellation, and there are very minimal passives that actually increase your performance. So keep this in mind. This is ESO's endgame grind, both gear and champion points, and I'm not a fan of the system. It doesn't feel very rewarding, fun, or intuitive, and overly complex for new players that open up the system and you're like, huh? But thankfully you can come to my website and find a guide on that. Next up, let's talk about PvE, and that's where the game shines. ESO is predominantly a PvE game with emphasis on story, exploration, and single-player accessible content. The endgame has grown to an enormous amount of group activities that will keep players busy for years. Here's a brief rundown of the type of PvE and what to expect. Overland. Consider Overland massive in the Elder Scrolls Online, which seems like countless zones to explore, quests, delves, world events, and more. This is where the majority of ESO's development time has been spent over the years, and if you love traditional Elder Scrolls games, exploring the map, getting lost in the story, this will be for you. Moreover, the base game, without any expansions or DLC, has enough story and content for years, let alone the DLC content. There's a downside with Overland content. It's very easy to complete. The huge big bad guy boss that was going to destroy Tamriel? Well, yeah, for a seasoned player like me, I can one-shot him with an ultimate and have 0 difficulty. Unlike games like New World, where Overland content is brutally hard no matter how experienced you are. Another issue I have with the Overland content is the stories. For the most part, they're not instance-based like Star Wars Republic. Thus, you have 20 people staying on top of a quest giver or boss, completely breaking with immersion and adding to the fact it's all over the top easy. But I'll say this, I've never played a game with such expansive Overland content. Next up are arenas, getting into our instance-based PvE content section. 4-player arenas like Dragonstar and Upper Craglorn and Black Rose Prison and Murkmire are high-octane fun. Each version comes with 2 modes, normal and veteran. They have leaderboards, incredible gear to collect, and are very difficult to complete, especially no death. There's plenty of achievements and score pushing to do, along with relevant gear sets to collect even years after launch. Arenas are all about action, combat, with quick spawns and a lot of AoE and challenging bosses. This content is what I enjoy most, a more intimate 4-player versus massive group content. But even solo players have something challenging to do in ESO. There are currently 2 solo arenas, Maelstrom and Rothgar and Vatashram Hollows in Markarth. Both provide providing a proving ground for solo players honing your skill in combat without a tank or a healer. Solo arenas too come in two versions, normal and veteran. Just like 4-player arenas, there are tons of great gear, achievements, and the ability to improve one's combat. Sure, you can memorize the bosses and mechanics, but sometimes you just have to react and adjust on the fly, making it a joy to repeat the content over and over and over. Dungeons are up next, 4-player instance-based and the bread and butter PvE content in ESO with over 45 and counting. You can expect at least 2 new dungeons per year. Dungeons now have 3 modes, normal, veteran, and hard mode. This means the average player that's new to the game and may not have very much skill can access the content, complete it, and collect some gear, while the try-hard PvEer has endless things to do, including better gear drops, titles, and dies. The big downside to ESO dungeons is you have zero idea which ones are hard and which ones are not. ESO does not have a gear score, so you end up with a somewhat alphabetized interface group finder with no real indication on which ones are challenging or not. The dungeon matchmaking system also has several long-lasting bugs, making getting a group obnoxiously difficult. Lastly, it feels like 99% of the player base plays DPS, so expect a 1-hour wait time as a DPS in a random dungeon queue, unless you have a pre-made group. However, once you start running the dungeons, it'll be a rush and invigorating to start trying to complete the trifecta runs, no death, speed, and hard mode. Lastly, we have Trials, which are 12-player large-scale PvE content. Most of your best in slot gear comes from Trials, along with best collectibles for completing the hardest content in the game. The downside to Trials is there's no group finder, and I find ESO a very solo-friendly game with a crowd that, well, mainly plays solo. Thus, Trials guilds come and go like the wind and can be difficult to find for the average or new player. Setting that aside, they are amazing with over 10, and the latest being Dreadcell Reef from the Heil chapter. One thing the game has done very well in recent years is making the normal mode very easy and accessible. Most players are fearful they cannot do Trials, but on normal mode, with a competent tank and a couple high damage dealers, nearly all of them can be done pretty easily. The downside of Trials is there's no trial finder, making it an exclusive group of PvE crowd unlikely to let someone new in. Moreover, the group can't scale downwards to, let's say, 6 players instead of 12. So sometimes finding the group and assembling it takes more time than running the trial. Lastly, the big downside of Trials is it's a DPS race versus all-out mechanic-based PvE. In Destiny 2, another game I played, the raids, or their version of Trials, require everyone to know what's going on, not just the tank. In ESO, if you have a mind-boggling amount of group DPS, you can skip nearly all of the mechanics and just burn the boss. Mainly the tank and the healer need to know what to do, and all the DPS just stay out of red and parse down the boss. But if you like large-scale PvE, ESO hasn't, and it's made leaps of improvements in terms of accessibility and getting access, and there's still work to be done. Companions are up next. Keep in mind, ESO released companions in 2021 with the Blackwood chapter. They have expanded to 4 companions currently, which are a moderate help in combat and more of a passive battle buddy than anything else. I'm not going to go into detail with companions, but I have builds and guides on my website. I consider companions in ESO much weaker than other games like Fallout, Skyrim, or Star Wars Republic. Sure, they do a little bit of DPS or healing, but when it comes to blocking, dodging, and bashing, sprinting, they completely miss the mark, and being a combat aid and end up being more of a story element battle buddy. Well, that's a high-level view of PvE and ESO, with a lot more content than what I mentioned, but this should give you an understanding of what you have to offer and make a decision if this game interests you. Let's switch gears and talk about my favorite but neglected aspect of the game, and that's PvP. Simply put, ESO PvP, when working right, is the most fun I've ever had in a multiplayer game. With the sandbox open world Cyrodiil, instance-based battlegrounds, and PvE PvP environment mix Imperial City, at its best, it's hands down the most exciting combat in any MMO or multiplayer game. The downside is the lack of performance due to archaic servers from 2012 and the lack of any development and incentives. I'll keep the server performance issue brief. But imagine playing and not being able to use your skills for 1 or 2 seconds. That's what happens on some servers in Cyrodiil and ESO. ESO North American Megaserver was given a hardware refresh in April of 2022, which saw a massive boost in performance. Allegedly, this is coming to PCU and consoles in the spring of next year. Moreover, the servers were supposed to get re-architecture with some of the base code being well written, but we received little information on this, and I don't suspect this is going according to their original timeline. So if you went to the timestamp, hit PvP, and wanted to find out if ESO's server issues were magically fixed, they are not. Moving on to the types of PvP in ESO. Cyrodiil, this is part of the core story of the 3 Banners War, with all 3 factions fighting out for the Ruby Ruby Throne. Becoming Emperor and obtaining the Ruby Throne was one of the greatest feelings in ESO, basically boosting your power tenfold and forcing you to defend your kingdom until you became dethroned. Cyrodiil is entirely objective-based with 24/7, 360 fight for territory, objective, and kills. Battlegrounds are smaller instance-based fights, which pits 3 teams of 4 against each other in various game modes. This typically runs way smoother than Cyrodiil and can be a great way to have fun and test your build against others. However, at a high level of matchmaking, the population can start getting really thin. You'll likely find yourself fighting with or against the exact same people over and over. Moreover, there's almost zero incentive to play Battlegrounds repeatedly. PvE, and specifically the card game TESO Tribute, has much more incentive than Battlegrounds, and this feature has almost seen zero support since launch, and it's a big disappointment. Imperial City is another zone that offers an interesting blend of PvE and PvP, with a combination of daily quests, overland bosses which drop valuable monster helms, and a unique currency earned called Telvar, not to mention an awesome fight in the center with Molag Bal if you can make it there. Lag is rarely seen in this zone, though it's possible that's simply because the population inside is usually very small. The exception to this is a twice-a-year PvP Mayhem event which offers increased experience points, alliance points, and other rewards. This brings a temporary surge of players into the city, and the group fights can be a blast. But outside of the 2 event period, it's usually a dead wasteland of ganker nightblades waiting in the shadows to one-shot new players. Moving on to the controversial card game TESO Tributes. TESO Tribute is a card game deck builder that was added in 2022 and is highly controversial because some people didn't think it was needed in the game, and especially me, I didn't see it coming. Some players absolutely love it, and with incredible incentives, it slaps Cyrodiil, Battlegrounds, and Imperial City right in the face. This has been the main focus of ZOS PvP, if you'd like to call it that. Look, I'm an avid Pokemon and Magic the Gathering player, and what makes those games fun for me are the characters, the monster, the strategy. And if you play online, the animations add a lot of excitement and big plays. Think of TESO Tribute as the exact opposite. Very slow-paced deck builder which doesn't include much fighting and nearly zero animation. Nothing against those that designed it, but the system is overly complex, zero flash, and I haven't touched it since the PTS, nor do I plan on. Let me be 100% honest and blunt with you. If you're looking for a predominant PvP MMO game, I would not recommend Elder Scrolls Online. World of Warcraft would be a good choice if you're looking for some serious competition. New World is a great choice if you're looking for big massive overland fights, and Guild Wars would be a relative choice if you're looking for something similar to ESO. The lack of server fixes, overpromise, and underdelivering in the aspect of PvP remains one of the reasons many players have left the game. I imagine the ship has sailed on ESO adding any more PvP features, but I hope rewind this back and look someday at how wrong I was. Moving on to another controversial topic, and that's the monetization of the game. ESO is a buy-to-play game with a cheap base cost of around $20, though you can get it much cheaper on sale. Then you'll have the option of a monthly sub right around $15. This nets you a ton of perks with crafting bags, holding an endless amount of materials, more XP, and so on. But the main benefit is all the DLC content that you would normally have to buy with crowns, the in-game currency. But we aren't done yet. In addition to base game cost, a sub, you'll likely have to spend around $30 to $60 for the latest expansion, or ESO calls them chapters. And you can see this game starts to become a money pit. Speaking of money pits, let's talk about the over-monetization of the game. This has been a major point of concern within the community. Unlike other games like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft, there's very little earnable mounts and cosmetics in comparison to their cash shop and crown store. Even quest starters or event activities always start there. They want you to jump in, get your appetite wet, and go nuts and buy all the items, specifically the dreaded loot crates. These haven't been outlawed yet, so nearly every beautiful cool mount, costume, or housing item revolves around RNG gambling on loot crates until your paycheck and your sanity run dry. ESO eventually put an Endeavor system in place, a way you can earn cosmetics, which I assume was done to avoid legal ramifications in European countries, though that's my speculation. The system has daily and weekly rotating tasks that blend PvE and PvP. It took me 1 year of playing nearly every day to obtain a cool looking mount. The cosmetics and the earnable items in the game are just terrible compared to other MMOs in the marketplace. Outside of the best PvEers in the game, there's almost nothing worth earning and collecting, and you're relegated to playing for a year solid or dropping a nuclear bomb on your credit card to get a mount. Speaking of nuclear bombs, let's talk about housing. ESO housing is so in-depth, so detailed, it could legitimately be its own game. Think of it like ESO with Legos. Housing provides you some utility by allowing you to store and organize items and collect items within your house. You can show off and flex off your trophies, achievements, pets, mounts, you name it. It's a total flex zone. What's the downside of housing then? It costs a lot of gold and most of the time, a lot of real money. Some houses cost literally $150, which is more than the base game, collector's edition of the latest chapter, and a sub. In order to get relevant and useful items like Mundustone, well, you're looking at another $300. And the list goes on and on. Housing is one of the most treasured parts of the game and the most predatory, and I don't participate. The reason I don't participate in housing, there's nothing that makes your character or your account more powerful. Unlike New World, there's no power boost. It's purely cosmetic and convenience, which is great if you're into that. It's ESO Legos, and it's a treasure for people, and that's what their end game is. They love it. I just wish it wasn't so heavily monetized. Let's bring all this information back together and answer this simple, original question. Is ESO worth playing in 2023? 1000%. It's my favorite MMO multiplayer game of all time, and I've been playing on and off since beta, and I love it. I don't think ESO is perfect. One entire and popular aspect of the game, PvP, has been completely neglected and graded. Champion point in-game system misses the mark in progression entirely. The game has turned into a solo-friendly questing and exploration game, and that isn't all bad. I wish the ESO would shift their cosmetic model from loot crates to earnable activities. I wish PvP and the servers would eventually get attention across all servers, and I wish there would be a new class, but we will see what the rest of 2023 brings. I honestly think this game is worth trying if you're new or returning, just playing the base game. Look, I've always wanted to play Skyrim with friends, and now there's even an add-on for that. But every time I go back to Skyrim, it's just not ESO. My home for the Elder Scrolls. The combat, the memories, the friends, the daily activities. It's just so fun. Through all of its flaws, I still love the game. It's not perfect, but hey, neither am I. And if you decide to play the game, head over to my website, Deltiasgaming.com, where I have customizable builds for beginners, PvE, and PvPers. Also consider watching me live on twitch.tv/Deltiasgaming, where my mom claims I'm the best streamer alive. Thanks for watching.